Thank you so much to the Beecham family for sharing their story and clearly are, in the best way possible, articulating the why behind our first policy issue, which I will spend about 2 minutes speaking about because really the stars of the show today are our advocates and our families here that have been affected by these issues. So first and foremost, as you heard at the end, facilitating timely diagnosis doesn't just save lives, it also saves money. It's really hard to put the focus on the money when we hear stories like we just heard, but we're here in Congress and we want to make that argument as well. We did a study to try and identify and quantify the cost. How does early diagnosis or timely diagnosis at the right moment save money? And through that study, we found that across 7 different diseases, it was an average of $220,000. It ranged up to over $500,000. And why? That's because it takes so long, over 6 years, for someone to get a rare disease diagnosis after the symptoms first present. It takes over almost 17 different medical encounters to get a correct diagnosis. This is not acceptable. We know, as we just heard, our nation's newborn screening system, it saves lives. It detects life-threatening diseases before they can cause irreversible damage or death. Previously, for almost a decade and a half or so, the Advisory Committee on Heritable Disorders in Newborns and Children, ACHDNC, oversaw evaluation of conditions that were being considered for addition to the recommended uniform screening panel. And as you heard, states control their newborn screening panels, but the ACHDNC represented a trusted process to assess clinical benefits of screening, the treatment, and public health readiness to expand newborn screening to additional conditions. While the ACHDNC is no longer in existence, the need for that process has not gone away. And so here today, many advocates during Rare Disease Week have spoken about the need for this clear, transparent, evidence-based process to add new conditions and ensure that there is a trusted federal approach for states to be able to rely on to utilize when deciding what conditions to add to their panels. And while there is a lot of significant work underway to focus on a new newborn screening reauthorization bill, there are appropriations and report language priorities that have been put forward and will be discussed in the coming weeks to help strengthen our newborn screening system. Congress can also advance access to genetic testing and unlock the benefits of timely diagnosis in a few other ways. Here's 2 ways that Congress is currently considering advancing access to genetic testing, as well as the services that are needed, our workforce that's needed to help ensure the appropriate test is ordered at the right time for the right person, that it's interpreted correctly, and that those families get connected to care afterwards. The Access to Genetic Counselor Services Act, H.R. 6280, and also as a Senate bill, has been a policy solution put forward that deals primarily with Medicare, but the important part is that it will unlock the ability for genetic counselors. It will recognize them as Medicare providers and allow them to directly receive reimbursement. We all know that genetic counselor services are needed beyond Medicare. However, Medicare is a bellwether for policy, and if we can have Medicare reimbursement, that means more genetic counselors can safely go into the field, can train, that hospitals can employ them. And that is really important for unlocking the benefit of genetic counseling for the rest of the country. The other answer that Congress is working on is the Genomic Answers for Children's Act, H.R. 7118, and hopefully soon to be introduced in the Senate, in part thanks to all the advocates that are out there today. So I'm going to their meetings now to talk and ask Congress to co-sponsor this bill that will focus on the Medicaid population and ensure that coverage is provided for advanced genetic testing, whole genome sequencing, whole exome sequencing, which should be a covered benefit under the EPSTD program. I know acronyms, but it is ultimately very often kids don't receive the benefit of genetic testing until they have tried every other possible option. You saw that 17 medical encounters. So we know that through other data that's been collected at a state that early access when there are unanswered questions means cost savings, it means more accurate diagnosis, and it means saved lives saved. And so this bill will go a long way to instructing states to unlock that coverage first line for our pediatric population, and do lots of stakeholder education and work with states to make sure that they are providing those services, not as a last resort after someone is too ill to be helped by the therapies that are out there. So again, thank you to the Beechams for sharing the story, the why. Sorry to have to get technical after that, but this really, there are practical tools and solutions, as you're going to hear throughout this briefing, that Congress can undertake to really make a difference for the lives of today's generation of patients. So thank you. Since 1983, Congress has created incentives and policies that really recognize the inherent complexities in developing treatments for rare diseases. Congress has explicitly given the FDA authority to uphold the highest standards of regulatory safety and rigor, but to establish to apply a tailored approach. We often talk about regulatory flexibility. Because of that, there's nearly 1,400 orphan-designated patients, as we mentioned, helping rare disease patients nationwide. But in recent months, as was highlighted during a Senate Aging Committee hearing this morning, there has been a series of FDA actions on rare disease product applications that have been misaligned with public commitments and with those tools that Congress provided to apply flexibility. So, as advocates are out on the Hill today, as we spoke about in Congress this morning, we are asking for more information. We're asking for Congress to ensure that FDA is applying the tools that they have today to make sure that this generation of rare disease patients can benefit from the promise that's in today's pipelines. How can they do that? They can conduct outreach to the agency so that we can better understand their approach to the application of the accelerated approval pathway, to improving the predictability and the consistency of how they apply regulatory flexibility, and to resume the use of advisory committees so that people in this room, people that have been involved in those clinical trials, and rare disease experts that simply can't exist within the agency with 10,000 rare diseases, have the opportunity to bring information forward that the FDA can use in their decision-making when they're facing complex decisions. Congress can also provide the necessary resources and the direction to optimize the Rare Disease Innovation Hub. You heard Senator Klobuchar mention it this morning. It was a huge advancement and an opportunity now to make sure that they have the resources and the authority to really help improve that consistency in how rare diseases are approached across the agency. And lastly, they can support policies that enable FDA to leverage those expert insights in other ways. They can establish the Rare Disease and Condition Advisory Committee within the hub, and they can support the Expert Act, which would establish a science-focused drug development policy to be able to bring, again, those external insights and expertise to support the dialogue that's necessary to really unlock the promise of today's pipelines for this generation of patients. So with that, I will leave it to James.